I found tampons in my husband's car and new clothes for my kid that I didn't buy. Is he cheating or am I overreacting? My husband and I have been together for a good 10 years now, married for 7 of those. We have one child, a little whirlwind of energy that keeps us on our toes. Our days usually start the same: hurried breakfasts, trying to get our kid ready for school, then both of us rushing off to work. Life has gotten so busy lately that it feels like we're living parallel lives rather than intertwined ones. We communicate, but it's mostly about logistics. It's all who's picking up our kid today? And don't forget the parent-teacher meeting. There's love there, don't get me wrong. But sometimes it feels buried under the weight of daily life. It wasn't always like this. There was a time when we'd spend weekends doing fun, spontaneous things, late-night movie marathons, date nights, even silly little road trips. But now, with our jobs and the never-ending responsibilities of parenthood, it's like those moments are a distant memory. Lately, though, I've been feeling a distance that isn't just because of the hectic pace of life. It's hard to pinpoint when I started noticing it, but my husband has seemed more distracted lately. He's on his phone a lot more. When I ask him about it, he just shrugs and says he's catching up on work emails or reading the news. It feels like we're always on the verge of talking, but never actually connecting. I brush it off. Life gets busy, right? It was a random Tuesday afternoon when I found the first tampon. I had just picked up our kid from school and was doing a quick cleanup of my husband's car because it was starting to look like a war zone. You know how it is with kids: crumbs everywhere, toys under the seats, half-empty water bottles rolling around. As I was reaching into the glove compartment to toss some old receipts, I saw it. A tampon. It's hard to describe what went through my mind at that moment. Confusion, mostly. I don't use tampons. Never have. I prefer pads, and my cycle is pretty light, so it's not like I'd carry them around just in case. So why was there a tampon in my husband's car? I stared at it for a minute, just holding it in my hand, trying to come up with a rational explanation. Maybe it was left there by accident? Maybe a female coworker left it during a carpool ride? Or maybe, no, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. Still, the thought nagged at me as I tossed it into the trash and finished cleaning the car. I didn't mention it to my husband that night. I told myself it was nothing, a fluke, a weird coincidence. But in the back of my mind, it was already planting seeds of doubt. Over the next few days, I started paying more attention. It wasn't like I was spying on him, but I noticed little things. He was coming home later than usual, always with an excuse about a late meeting or a client call. He seemed more distant, more distracted. I started wondering if I was just being paranoid, but the tampon in the car wouldn't leave my mind. The second suspicion: tampon in the bedroom. A week later, I found the second tampon. This one hit harder. It was a Saturday morning, and I was doing my usual cleaning routine. Our bedroom has always been my sanctuary, the one place in the house that feels like it's truly mine. I was making the bed, fluffing the pillows, and vacuuming the floor when I noticed something small near the nightstand. I bent down to pick it up, and there it was. Another tampon. This one wasn't in any packaging, it was just loose, lying on the floor near my husband's side of the bed. I froze, holding it in my hand, my mind racing a mile a minute. What the hell was going on? One tampon in the car could have been a weird coincidence. But now another one, in our bedroom? It didn't make sense. I felt like my world was starting to tilt off its axis. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the tampon, feeling a growing sense of dread. Was this a sign? Was there someone else? Was I being naive for not seeing it sooner? My husband was in the living room, watching TV with our kid. I could hear them laughing, completely oblivious to the emotional storm brewing inside me. I thought about confronting him right then and there, but I couldn't. What would I even say? Hey, why are there random tampons showing up in places where they don't belong? It sounded ridiculous in my head. So, I tucked the tampon into my pocket, swallowed my anxiety, and went back to cleaning. But now, the doubts were creeping in, and they were getting harder to ignore. A few days after that, I noticed something else that didn't sit right. Our kid came home from school wearing a new shirt, one I hadn't bought. I didn't think much of it at first. Kids grow so fast, and we're always needing to get new clothes for them. But this shirt wasn't the kind of thing I would normally pick out. It was a brand I didn't recognize, and it was a little more expensive looking than what we usually buy. I asked our kid about it, and they shrugged, saying, "Daddy bought it for me." Another small, seemingly insignificant thing, but it added to the growing list of oddities. I hadn't noticed my husband buying new clothes for our child lately, and he usually ran purchases by me, especially since we try to stick to a budget. That night, I casually asked him about the shirt, trying to sound as nonchalant as possible. "Hey, did you pick up some new clothes for our child?" He nodded, not even looking up from his phone. "Yeah, I saw them on sale when I was out last week. Figured, our kid could use some new stuff." I nodded, pretending to accept the explanation, but something still felt off. It wasn't like him to make spontaneous purchases, especially not without mentioning it. Confrontation and denial. By this point, the weight of everything was getting too much for me to bear. I had to say something. I had to know what was going on, even if I didn't want to hear the answer. One evening, after our child was in bed, I finally worked up the courage to talk to him. My heart was pounding in my chest as I sat down next to him on the couch, trying to figure out how to start. I took a deep breath and forced myself to speak. "Can I ask you something?" He looked up from his phone, raising an eyebrow. "Sure, what's up?" I hesitated, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. "I found a tampon in your car. And another one in our bedroom." The words hung in the air, and for a second, it felt like the entire world froze. He blinked, clearly caught off guard, then furrowed his brow in confusion. "What?" I could feel my heart racing, but I pushed forward. "I don't use tampons, and I found one in your car last week. Then I found another one in the bedroom a few days ago." I just don't understand." His eyes widened in surprise, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flash of guilt. But then he started laughing, like, actual laughing. Not the response I was expecting. "Babe," he said, shaking his head and chuckling, "I swear I have no idea how those got there. Maybe one of the neighbors or their kids left something in the car? They borrow it sometimes, right?" His response didn't feel as reassuring as he probably thought it would. Sure, a neighbor borrowing the car might explain one, but not both tampons. And how did one end up in our bedroom? I stared at him, trying to read his expression. Was he lying? Was this all just some absurd coincidence? I didn't know what to believe anymore. "Okay, but what about the one in our room?" His face softened, and he reached out to take my hand. "I have no idea, honestly. Maybe it got stuck in my stuff from when I was at the gym or something. People leave things in lockers all the time. I know it looks weird, but I promise you, there's nothing going on." There was sincerity in his voice, and for a moment, I wanted to believe him. But the tampons weren't the only thing bothering me. I had to address the new clothes, too. "And the clothes you bought for our child," I added quietly. "You didn't tell me about them. You've never bought new clothes without mentioning it before." He let out a long sigh and rubbed his eyes. "I didn't think it was a big deal. Our child needed some new stuff, and I saw a sale while I was out. I figured I'd just grab a few things. I didn't mean to keep it from you." I could hear the frustration in his voice, and part of me felt guilty for pushing this so hard. Maybe I was overthinking everything. Maybe the stress of our day-to-day lives was getting to me, and I was looking for problems where there weren't any. Still, the doubt lingered. After our conversation, I didn't feel as relieved as I had hoped. I kept replaying his words in my mind, dissecting his responses, trying to figure out if I was just being paranoid or if there was something more going on. I needed a second opinion, someone who could help me see things more clearly. So, I did what any modern person would do, I turned to the internet. Specifically, I found myself on Reddit, scrolling through the relationship advice forums, reading story after story of people in similar situations. Some had happy endings, some didn't, but the more I read, the more my anxiety grew. Finally, I decided to post my own story. I wrote out everything: the tampons, the clothes, the odd behavior. I asked for advice, hoping that maybe someone else had been in my shoes and could offer some insight. Within hours, the replies came flooding in. Some people told me to trust my gut, that there was no way two random tampons could show up without something shady going on. Others urged caution, reminding me that it could just be a series of strange coincidences and not to jump to conclusions. One user suggested that I keep an eye on things for a while, but not confront him again unless I had more concrete evidence. I read through the responses late into the night, feeling both comforted and overwhelmed. Everyone had their own opinion, but in the end, no one could tell me what to do. It was my marriage, my family, and I had to make the decision for myself. Resolution or uncertainty. Over the next few weeks, I tried to move forward. My husband seemed more attentive after our conversation, almost like he could sense my lingering doubts. He started coming home earlier, spending more time with me and our child, and being more open about where he was and what he was doing. He even stopped using his phone so much, leaving it on the counter when he was home instead of keeping it glued to his hand. The tampons never appeared again, and as time went on, I started to believe that maybe it had all been some weird misunderstanding after all. Maybe I had let my imagination run wild because of the stress of our busy lives. I wanted to trust him, and for the most part, I did. But in the back of my mind, there was still a sliver of doubt, a small voice that whispered, "What if?" I knew I couldn't live my life constantly questioning his every move, and I didn't want to be that person who was always suspicious. But trust, once shaken, takes time to rebuild. So, I chose to let it go, for now, at least. I decided to focus on the present, on our family, and on the small, everyday moments that made up our life together. But I couldn't help but wonder if, one day, I'd stumble across another tampon or another unexplained oddity. Would I be able to handle it with the same grace? Or would it break the fragile trust we were trying to rebuild? Only time would tell. And for now, that's all I could do: wait, watch, and hope that everything was truly as innocent as it seemed. Thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed these Reddit stories, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you never miss an update. See you in the next one.